What happens when you take a company that always chases the bottom dollar, a studio in the middle of a leadership crisis, and an inability to learn from history? You get the situation at Infinity Ward in circa 2010. After Activision fired Jason West and Vince Zampella, many of their former colleagues jumped ship and joined them at Respawn Entertainment. But still wanting Modern Warfare 3 to ship on time, Activision assigned Sledgehammer Games and Raven Software to assist in finishing the game. While Modern Warfare 3 ended up being a success in the fall of 2011, it could have just as easily been a disaster. So after that, you'd think the powers that be would have learned, right? Well, you'd be wrong. Skipping forward now to February of 2018, Sledgehammer co-founders Michael Condrey and Glenn Schofield left the company and not long after also parted ways with Activision completely. While it doesn't appear from my research that any other key talent at Sledgehammer followed them, the loss of their leadership obviously caused some problems at the studio. In early 2019, it was leaked that Sledgehammer had been removed from the main developer status on Call of Duty 2020, breaking the 3-year dev cycle that their introduction into the fold had helped create. While concrete details aren't available, reports indicate that Sledgehammer clashed with Raven Software, who's in charge of the campaign mode. In Sledgehammer's stead, Treyarch was brought in fresh off Black Ops 4, and they quickly churned out Black Ops Cold War in less than 2 years. Surprisingly, it wasn't a complete garbage fire, and it was received moderately well. But with their removal off the project, Sledgehammer had to go back to the drawing board for their new game, Call of Duty 2021. Various rumors and reports exist about what went on behind the scenes, but by the end, Sledgehammer decided to return to World War II. While their previous title hadn't been the best received game ever, it made sense that a second crack at the conflict could potentially generate better results. While there are some things in Vanguard better than World War II, overall, the game is looked at as another black sheep in the family and is lumped in with Ghosts as one of the worst CoD games ever released. For starters, in the time since the game started development, Warzone had taken the world by storm and become very popular online. This meant that Vanguard's multiplayer had to be designed not just around its own suite of features and weapons, but that of another team's game as well. This affected the way weapons were tuned and designed, so that they could be viable in both regular multiplayer and Warzone. And while loot boxes wouldn't be a concern in this title, the map design didn't leave anyone blown away. While the game felt closer to Modern Warfare 2019 thanks to being developed on the same engine, the same magic that many felt from that game didn't exactly translate over. Then there's the Zombies mode. At this point in the history of the series, Zombies fans know what they want out of it, and Vanguard did not deliver. Not only was traditional round-based gameplay removed at launch, but the map was a cobbled mess of locations and objectives from various multiplayer settings. There's a litany of other things that make this mode repulsive to Benny, but I don't care about zombies to begin with, so I'll just leave it there. But with 2 strikes so far, perhaps the campaign could be the saving grace. Unfortunately for Sledgehammer, the following story would quickly, and rightfully so, be dubbed as one of the worst in the series. From technical glitches, wonky pacing, and stupid choices that both insult history and player intelligence, Vanguard is hands down the worst Call of Duty campaign I've played to date. But is there any fun to be had here at all? Well, let's assemble our task force and find out. The game begins in Hamburg in 1945, near the end of World War II. Here we play as Novak, one of the 6 specially picked Special Forces operators tasked with infiltrating a Nazi subbase to retrieve intel on a project known only as Phoenix. Now, based on the name alone, what do you think Project Phoenix is? Well, if you said it's a secret project designed to make sure the Third Reich survived the destruction of Germany, you'd be right, as the name is right on the nose. The entire game is, in fact, as I'm sure you'll figure out. So after boarding a train and surprisingly not crashing it, the strike team, codenamed Vanguard, make it to the subbase and infiltrate it. Now, pretty much right off the bat, we have what I see to be our first issue, and that's the mission design not gelling with the narrative. The reason the task force was sent in was so they could slip in and out easily.
Brass handpicked 6 specialists to hit the crowds fast and get away clean. An army can't do that. Too loud, too slow.
Which is right. They won't see us coming. In and out with those papers before they know it.
This is typically the MO of Special Forces groups and why you use them. It's a scalpel instead of a hammer. However, that said, Special Forces usually have some sort of support teams either with them or waiting to pull them out of the fire. In Modern Warfare 2, for instance, when the 141 infiltrates the Gulag to find Prisoner 627, a contingent of Marines back them up as fire support, not to mention the air support from Little Birds and F-15s. Vanguard doesn't have any support whatsoever. They're on their own. Because of this, it would make sense that the team would want to stealth their way to the objective. Instead, they just tackle every issue head-on and spray bullets until whatever is in front of them is dead, and do so without any care for life and limb. It becomes clear early on that these soldiers are not beholden to the laws of reality. While Call of Duty is a game meant for entertainment first, and so has to stretch what's believable, the best games in the series to me have always stuck close to reality as much as possible. It's when games stray too far from that threshold we end up getting the worst games of the series. Remember when characters in Ghosts kept getting shot and stabbed only to shrug it off and be fine moments later? Well, the same here is true with our main cast. These are not soldiers, they are superheroes, and this isn't a gritty World War II story, this is a comic book. On paper, I would actually be okay with this, but several things keep the story from living up to that potential. First of all is the presentation. Like years past, Vanguard sets out to have realistic-looking graphics and gorgeous cutscenes. Upon starting the game, you're expecting it to be grounded in reality because of this, and that's the basis I'm working off for this retrospective. After starting though, you'll realize that the game isn't concerned with working in conjunction with its art style, and that's down to the writing. The writing is bad, there's no way to get around that. Basic story elements are underdeveloped, and the dialogue is laughably cartoonish. For a game that looks this realistic, it should not sound this dumb.
Hey, be nice.
I'm always nice.
How many medals you think we'll win if we pull this off, Jackson?
After today, they're gonna have to name one after me, Miller. Just remember, we're a team up there. And stay in formation this time or the SAG will have both your stripes.
Formations just slow me down.
See what I have to deal with?
Planes, we lucky they gave us ammo. That one's dead weight. Just gonna slow us down.
Secret V2 rocket facility. You think you could fly one of those?
I can fly anything.
As I said though, this could have potentially worked as a whole with a more stylized art style. If you want to write a superhero story set in World War II, go for it, just go full Wolfenstein. Give it comic panel transitions and let the violence be over the top. The characters already are. Crank everything up to 11 and tell an alt history World War II story. That could actually be really cool and a fresh idea in such a long-running series like Call of Duty. Make Vanguard the Battlefield Bad Company of Call of Duty. But because the game appears to be set in reality, we have to treat the writing with the same level of attention that we would give any piece of historical fiction. And just on the surface, the game does not do a good job with its writing because of that. Forget about digging deeper. One of the biggest examples of this is our main villain. After infiltrating the sub-base, the team ends up being captured and hauled back to Berlin for interrogation. It's here the game unmasks our big bads, Freisinger and his toady Richter. Unfortunately, Freisinger is probably the stupidest villain in the entire CoD franchise, as capturing and interrogating Vanguard gives him nothing, robbing him of any threat by the end of the game thanks to his stupidity. At first it's implied that a mole leaked Operation Phoenix, and so Freisinger wants to know who it is, but that thread goes absolutely nowhere and the game never reveals how the Allies discovered the project's existence. We see each member of the Vanguard accidentally gather intelligence on it over the course of the game, but no one on the squad ever acknowledges it for a satisfying payoff. The only one who does is Richter, who's probably only one of the two characters that I actually enjoyed. One of the other characters describes him as a little mouse, and that's honestly a perfect description. His role in the game as interrogator of the squad is to gather information and report to Freisinger. As he investigates though, he slowly puts the puzzle pieces together and realizes what Freisinger is planning and then schemes to ensure his own survival in the New World Order, regardless of whose it is. Watching him put the pieces together only for it to be too late was actually fun to watch during the cutscenes. That same enjoyment can't be passed on to Freisinger though, as he's playing a stereotypical Nazi officer. He doesn't even look cool like Scarface from Sledgehammer's previous World War II game. He's basically if Red Skull in Captain America 1 never got to be Red Skull and just stayed as Johann Schmidt. Not to mention he, and by extension his guards, pretty much break every rule in the book when it comes to keeping prisoners. When Vanguard is locked up, they're all kept in the same cell instead of being separated, and they clearly weren't searched well or at all, as one of them has a knife in their boot that they don't bother to hide really at all. Some of that could work if the game weren't in a realistic setting, but it is, so it comes off as bone dead stupid. Also, if this review feels a little disjointed and weird instead of following a more linear path by going story mission to story mission, then congrats, you know what it's like to play the game now. While Vanguard is captured, we get to dig in and learn more about our characters, except for Novak, who got bludgeoned to death with a chair at the beginning of the first mission. While an interesting idea, unfortunately these flashback missions ruin the pacing of the game and leave you confused as we bounce all around the timeline. We start our various series of flashbacks with Arthur Kingsley, a British paratrooper. Through his memory, we experience the nights before and early hours of D-Day, when British and US paratroopers were airdropped him ahead of the main invasion force to perform search and destroy missions, knocking out artillery and other fortifications such as the Merville gun battery. During the mission, he befriends fellow Sergeant Richard Webb, and the two become fast friends as they work together to win the day. Overall, Kingsley's level isn't much to write home about, but doesn't do anything egregious either. A gimmick it does introduce is allowing Kingsley to command where and when soldiers should attack certain positions, but it's unfortunately not used enough to really be memorable. Moving on, we come to our next member of the team, Polina Petrova. It seems that Sledgehammer did take the criticism of their last game to heart, as they include more areas of the war than just the Western Front. This comes into play here as Polina hails from Stalingrad and is a nurse in the Red Army. However, she wishes to fight on the front lines rather than serve in the rear. Thanks to the encroaching German army, she's about to get her chance. The Battle of Stalingrad begins and Polina is forced to take up arms against the Germans after her father is killed. While I like the fact that they took inspiration from a real person here, I really dislike the execution of the gameplay in her levels. While giving Polina the ability to swiftly move undercover and parkour over things was cool, her story feels like a cheap knockoff of Farah's story in Modern Warfare 2019. They're both women warriors that are in leadership positions that traditionally they probably wouldn't have been in considering where they come from. They both lose their fathers in a traumatic conflict, and they both become symbols of hope for the survivors around them alongside their older brother. The clear difference between them is the quality of writing for their stories. Farah is leaps and bounds a better written character than Polina, and that shows in her performance. Farah has a great tactical mind to her, coming with battle strategies to fight both Al-Qatala and the invading Russians in Urzikstan. She's a natural leader who is forced to take up the mantle and lead a revolution for the betterment of her people. While she can be quick to anger, especially when betrayed, she knows when to keep that anger in check to better pursue her goals and achieve victory. Overall, she's a very nuanced character, and that comes across well on screen. Polina, on the other hand, is mainly a one-note killing machine solely bent on revenge for the death of her family. Through her actions and through her missions, you get the sense that she could really care less about the survival of Russia after the Battle of Stalingrad begins. Her main goal is killing as many Germans as possible, and she won't stop until she gets to the top. While I think they sometimes attempt to make her a little more relatable, those moments usually fall flat because of the rest of her dialogue.
I shoot Nazis. They die. That's my plan. Everyone I love is dead. And the only time I feel anything is when I watch a German beg for his life. So, I am exactly where I need to be.
What really makes Polina feel like a discount Farah is the finale to her gameplay levels. Let me know if this sounds familiar. Our heroine is hunted in a cramped space by an enemy much tougher than her, and the player must sneak up and slowly kill them by stabbing them various times. If you think this does sound familiar, that's because it's one of Farah's playable sections in Modern Warfare, where as a little girl, she's hunted by a Russian soldier in her own home. But while there is a harrowing encounter given that your father had just been shot in front of you and your enemy is a man 3 times your size, Polina's blatant copying of this level just 2 years later doesn't do near as good a job. For starters, the Nazi commander Steiner isn't the man who personally pulled the trigger on your dad like J-12 was in Modern Warfare, so you're not as invested in taking him down. He's really just another German. Also, the hit reg on when you're supposed to attack him doesn't work half the time, meaning you're not really doing the correct amount of damage to him and opening up yourself to attack, which is annoying and sometimes results in your death, prompting a checkpoint restart. It's never fun when you get punished for something the game does wrong. And on top of that, her sections are littered with historical inaccuracies all over the place, constantly pulling you out of the story. While some of them aren't big enough for non-history buffs to notice, there are others that even casual observers will probably take note of. For instance, at one point Polina's brother is shot and sacrifices himself to allow her to escape and blows himself up with a satchel of grenades. Well, the grenades he uses are clearly American Mark II grenades, and not the Russian-made grenades that look like stubbier versions of the classic German stick grenades. Given the classic design of the American grenade, those popping up in Russia are a real head-scratcher. Then the game has the gall to suggest that it was purely Polina's actions that inspired the Russian troops to eventually take back Stalingrad. Look, say what you will about the leaders of the Soviet Union and even modern-day Russia, but anywhere between 1 million to 2 million people died during the battle, including an untold number of civilians. The Battle of Stalingrad is one of the bloodiest battles in human history, and an event of that significance probably shouldn't be trivialized by making your fictional character the hero that turned the tide of battle. As with my rules for the previous game set in World War II, new place, new rules. Real place, real history. Make Polina from the fictional city of Sovietgrad or something and have her turn the tide of battle there, sure, that's fine. But inserting her into this specific conflict and making her the hero of it? Religion isn't involved here at all, but it's almost blasphemous. Given that Polina's character is based on a real woman, one who is used for propaganda purposes as well, no less, there's an easy way for Sledgehammer to have their cake and eat it too. All these stories are being told in flashbacks during interrogation. Trumping up Polina's achievements in an over-the-top fashion during the game before cutting back to the real her in the cutscenes with a quip about how the propaganda office exaggerates is such an easy out. Instead, the game just decides to rewrite history for its own benefit. And unfortunately, Russian history isn't the only history the game plays fast and loose with. Our next character spotlight is on Jackson Wade, an American pilot in the Pacific Theater. Our first mission with him is set during the Battle of Midway, where we control the bombing runs on the Japanese aircraft carriers Soryu and Kaga, although in reverse order from when they were actually sunk. Something I failed to bring up in my CoD World War II video is that there is a brief mission during the Battle of the Bulge where you control a plane as it's escorting bombers over Germany. I didn't really care for it, but it didn't impact the story much, so I omitted it from the video. I'm really glad I did now because I can talk about it here in conjunction with the mission at Midway. Can I just say, I don't understand how hard it is for first-person games to make controlling a plane feel good. World War II's third-person section plays fine, but it's not my favorite. You can lock onto enemies and follow them around, but your weapons become hilariously inaccurate if you do so. Instead, I just led my shots and fought them like that. The Battle of Midway is kind of the opposite problem, where you're locked in the first person's perspective and your plane feels really clunky to control. Also, from a historical perspective, the game gives credit to Wade for destroying both aircraft carriers, which is stupid, as from my research, the type of plane he was flying only had enough ammo stores for one of the type of bombs dropped onto the aircraft carriers. Also, while the bombing squadron that the game says Wade is with did sink the Kaga, a completely different group hit Soryu. Again, an easy way around this is for Wade to contradict himself during interrogation and embellish events to make himself look good, providing an unreliable narrator to the story. But like everything else in the game, the story treats everything as straight up history, making all the historical inaccuracies all the more blatant. But overall, the Battle of Midway is a pretty short experience and pales in comparison to the problems of the following Wade mission. Following Midway, the game cuts to a year and a half later where Wade and his tail gunner are shot down over Bougainville Island. They become separated after Wade is wounded in the crash, and you spend the first half of the mission slinking around in the jungle avoiding Japanese patrols. After eventually getting captured, Wade and his tail gunner are then saved by a patrol from the 93rd Infantry Division, an all-black unit that wouldn't show up on the island until 4 months after this mission takes place. Amazingly, instead of learning from their mistakes in the previous game where racism is solved with a quick handshake, Sledgehammer somehow doubles down on completely butchering their attempt to comment on race relations in the US military in the 1940s. The writing here is probably the worst out of the entire game, as these soldiers are played so stereotypically, I'd say it borders on actually being racist.
We draw the snipers out. Pilfrey, your name's up.
Hope there's grits in heaven.
Not to mention all the references they make to notable black people at the time, which Wade somehow doesn't seem to have any knowledge of. A particularly egregious moment is when Wade doesn't know who Jesse Owens is.
When I get the word, I want to see your best Jesse Owens. Who?
For those of you that are unaware, Jesse Owens was an athlete that famously competed and won several gold medals in the 1936 Olympic Games. Where exactly were the Olympics held that year? Berlin, Germany. Owens was known the world over for his achievements, and he even helped campaign for FDR's opponent in the 36th presidential race. Point being, in 1943, people in the US might have still been prejudiced against him because of his skin color, but they certainly knew who he was. Look him up sometimes, it's sad what happened to him afterward. But moving on, not only does the game treat these soldiers as caricatures and put them into events they don't belong in, but our playable character continues to be stupid. Earlier, when slinking through the jungle, Wade found a downed Japanese plane and salvaged a flare gun. Despite being surrounded by Japanese troops, Wade immediately fires it off. The game treats this as no big deal. Later, when Wade and the 93rd clear out a fortified position, the squad leader gets ready to shoot a flare gun to signal friendly forces nearby.
Pilfrey, shoot the flare! Let's see him stop us now.
Are you crazy? Why would you fire that here? You just gave the entire Japanese army our location.
So, Wade thinks by shooting off a flare, they'll be alerting enemy forces to their position. So then what the heck was it that he did earlier? I understand retrieving the flare gun in the first place, but the immediate use while being hunted is what gets me. Wait until you're sure you're in the clear to use it, not when you're on the run. So anyway, Wade and the 93rd clear out a runway so they can steal a plane and turn the tide of battle, which of course isn't what happened, but we need to move on. Our final character is Australian Lucas Riggs, and the best character in the game. He's a member of the Rats of Tobruk, a unit of Australians that fought during the siege of Tobruk that lasted from April to December of 1941 in Libya. Lucas and his fellow Australians are looked down upon by British officers in command, which creates a great sarcastic and rebellious attitude in them. This actually injects these levels with a fun energy as the characters banter back and forth. And because the leadership is shown to be cowardly officers who don't like getting their hands dirty, Lucas and his comrades have to show off some intelligence for once. The level design opens up a bit as well, and allows the player to choose what targets at the supply depot to hit first, as well as giving you a selection of grenades to choose from. After several missions of incompetent characters and bad writing, I was actually having fun with this mission finally. So while Lucas and his mates manage to deal a blow to the Nazis, leadership sees him as nothing but insubordinate. This continues into the next mission during the Battle of El Alamein. A slight critique of this mission is that the North Africa campaign is well known for its tank battles, and we don't ever get to control a tank. Seems like a missed opportunity. Instead, Lucas and his team work on clearing trenches as the battle rages, and what in the world?
They fly now? They fly now!
I think now's the time to bring up this game is kinda buggy. Nothing game-breaking really ever pops up, but little visual glitches are all over the place. From little things like trees and grass popping in and out to the entire interior of the submarine and the opening mission not loading in for several seconds, it's a bizarre experience. Say what you will about some of the Call of Duty campaigns, but they're usually pretty polished. Even Ghosts ran like perfection and didn't have any technical hiccups. Vanguard, on the other hand, was constantly throwing something my way. So while it never outright crashed on me, these bugs were really distracting and just helped detract from the experience even more. Moving on from the bugs though, the rats end up coming through and help win the day, again throwing the figure to history because this part of the battle that it's depicting didn't actually happen, but whatever, and Lucas is sent to the brig when the British officer again disregards the efforts of the Australian soldiers and he punches him. Now that we've met the Vanguard, how are they as a group? Irritating, I think, is a good word for it. Most of their time together is spent bickering until it's revealed that I guess getting captured was their plan all along, even though it clearly wasn't. But once they get the upper hand on Richter, they all come together and act as if they'd been best friends all along. Going from a cutscene where they're obviously not getting along to then acting chummy gives the player a little whiplash. Overall, the story isn't told well enough to clue the player in on when the team is play acting for their captors or when they're actually fighting and not enough time is spent with them in present day to understand how the team gels as a group. Webb is even executed at one point, and it doesn't elicit much of a reaction from anyone other than Kingsley. The team seems a little upset when Novak, a non-speaking character with us just for a single level, is killed, but there's little to no reaction from any of the others when Webb is shot in front of them. Say what you will about the overall quality of their last attempt at a campaign, but the characters in the 1st Infantry really felt like they were a brotherhood, and there were several fun moments of the cutscenes that helped reinforce that.
Hey, I'm just lying around. Show me your girl.
Thought I told you not to go through my things.
What kind of chump doesn't open a sugar report?
The kind who thinks it's a Dear John. See the address? She wrote Daniels, not Red. Only one reason to be so formal. Hate to say it, I think she's cutting you loose. Or hey, maybe it's like Schrodinger's letter. You know, you don't open it, she's still your girl.
Maybe it's like Schrodinger's letter.
She's pregnant.
Whoa! Hey, that's huge.
Right. Daniels is gonna be a daddy.
Yeah.
She was trying to let me know, but I wasn't ready to hear it.
All right. I could use another cup of joe. Come on, you mooks, let's give him some space.
But I don't want coffee.
Sure you do.
With Vanguard, we don't get any of that. They just bicker at one another until they're all suddenly best friends and they go on adventures and kill Nazis together. Going back to the comic book angle, this whole thing feels like Call of Duty trying to get their Avengers Assemble moment out the door before doing proper setup. And since they've rushed through it, we didn't get Avengers, we got Joss Whedon's Justice League. You can't tell me they weren't at least a little inspired by stuff in the MCU. This scene here is pretty much ripped straight out of Age of Ultron, it's just got a World War II smear over it. And I think it could have actually worked if they decided to make this a prelude to zombies. If that had been the direction they are moving in, you could easily throw all of my complaints with historical inaccuracies out the window, since the idea would be alternate history anyway. But instead, we get STG-44s in the Pacific a whole year before German factories began producing that weapon. Great job, Sledgehammer. So anyway, to wrap up the story, Freisinger's plan is to leave Germany and go underground to ensure the Nazi party survives and can resurface again at a later date. As the Vanguard breaks out of their holding cell, Freisinger plans to leave Berlin by plane at Tempelhof Airport, which at this point during the battle for Berlin would have already been in the hands of the Soviets. Yeah, overall Freisinger and the other Germans have a very blasé reaction to the fact that Berlin is being overrun by the Red Army as they speak. Given that Russian artillery bombed the city from the day the battle began until the Germans finally surrendered, I'm also not sure if these guys would be working in their nice offices while shells are probably coming down everywhere. Overall, everything involving Freisinger just feels off and he's horribly written. Remember when I said that Sledgehammer's last game could use a central villain to help connect everything better? If this is the result of that, then I take it back. He even stupidly signed his own death warrant by bragging that a high-ranking officer such as himself would be useful to the Allies and that he'd end up being just fine. I don't know what he or the game were thinking when he said that. Did Sledgehammer not hear of the Nuremberg trials? Freisinger would most definitely be a potential candidate to be charged for war crimes there. If Sledgehammer was thinking that he would have been a candidate for Operation Paperclip and that's what they meant, then they really misunderstood what that was about. Operation Paperclip was just about recruiting scientists and technicians, not officers. So either way, this guy's goose is cooked. But with the bad guy dead, Vanguard gets on a plane to escape Berlin, which is stupid because any plane with Nazi markings trying to escape would have been shot down immediately, and they discover a treasure trove of Easter eggs.
How about this? Project Nova.
I can beat it. Project Ether. Reviving the dead.
With their next destination set, the team sets off for more adventures in the future that certainly won't happen, and the campaign finally ends. I have to say, I really thought it couldn't get worse than Black Ops 3 and Ghosts, but Sledgehammer somehow found a way. I've been saying throughout the review that this game could have maybe been better if they leaned more into the comic book style writing and just gone completely over the top, but I feel like the only reason that seems like an option is because of just how bad the writing is. I'm able to find a creative way to spin it and maybe turn it into something good, but I think the writers thought they actually had something here. They really thought they had created a cast of interesting characters and even bragged about how memorable they were at a panel at New York Comic Con in 2021.
We came into this process saying, how do we make the iconic CoD characters? Because you don't really have that in Call of Duty right now.
Yeah, a lot of century, that is.
And so we came into this being like, who could be our sort of like flagship CoD characters? Because we want to make Vanguard 2 and Vanguard 3, because we have 2 more stories that we really want to tell with these characters. So we are hoping that if people love them as much as we do.
Well, that certainly won't happen. I wasn't able to find concrete numbers, but did find a quote from an Activision earnings call where they admit the game didn't reach their expectations. They partially blame the World War II setting, but I think everyone just knew this one was going to be a stinker from word go, and so many didn't bother to engage. It's unfortunate because at one time, Sledgehammer probably did have the promise and the skill to deserve a spot as one of the main 3 developers of Call of Duty, but with Vanguard's failure, it seems like they've been demoted to an overglorified support studio now. While they're the lead devs of the all-new Modern Warfare 3, they're not working on their own franchise anymore. Digging around, it looks like the narrative team at Infinity Ward has helped Sledgehammer with this one, although all the writers I was able to find for the new game didn't work on either of the previous 2 entries. By the time this video is out, the game will officially be released, which means the early access for the campaign would have come and gone as well. We'll see if with Infinity Ward's guidance, Sledgehammer has what it takes to live up to the Modern Warfare name, or if they're doomed to stay in the back as Call of Duty's worst lead studio. Hopefully, Vanguard will just be a low point in the studio's history the way Ghost was for Infinity Ward. It's all uphill from here. The multiplayer for sure looks like to be a crowd pleaser this year, but time will tell if their storytelling skills have improved. At least by working on a Modern Warfare game, they don't have to worry about historical research, since they clearly suck at it. If they do ever touch the Second World War again, maybe it'd be good for them to go back and learn a thing or two from their other sister studio.